Welcome everyone to another great episode of the Average Ontario Anglers Fishing Podcast. Now, if you are listening to this, it's because you are already excited about what has recently opened. It's been open for a couple weeks now since you're hearing this episode. You're going to love the topic because any information I can get on it, I know I appreciate. So we're going to be getting some information from an amazing guest today. And we'll be passing on that information directly to you, just like, liquidation sales. It's like, we'll pass on the savings directly to you. So we're going to have a guest. I'll spoil it now. His name's Kory Maxfield. He's from Slump Bust Outdoors. And say hi to everyone there, Kory.
How's it going, everybody?
All tens of our listeners. And
there you go.
And as usual, we have Jesse. And Jesse's going to start us off, as usual, with an interesting fishing fact. And as usual, we have no idea what it's about.
So I thought we could do a very brief, interesting fishing fact just so we have more time to talk to Kory. But I thought we could go into a little bit about tiger muskie, because the other day we were fishing for pike and Andrew actually caught one, which was quickly released because it wasn't muskie season at the time, but it was his first tiger muskie ever. So it really got us thinking. But Andrew's question is,
okay, if pike season is open and muskie season is closed, and I catch a tiger muskie, this is honest, I don't know. If I catch a tiger muskie, could I have taken a photo with that fish nicely and prolonged its release because it's half pike or because it's half muskie? Because in this area, pike is open year round because they don't want the pike in the Kawarthas. Pike is open year round because they don't want them. The tiger muskie is only there because pike are there, which they don't want. So if I catch a tiger muskie there, which is half pike, can I take a photo with it? Like, is it listed in the regs as a species? Is there no regs on it, like rock bass or something like that? I don't know. If anyone's listening who's a conservation officer or knows one and can give me a definitive answer if tiger muskie is like a season or not, if I could have taken a photo, I'm really curious.
So my rebuttal is, what is it called? A tiger what? Okay.
Tiger muskie. But can you keep a rock bass when it's bass season?
But a rock bass isn't a largemouth or smallmouth bass. It's a different species completely. You're not going to win that one.
I want to know if anyone has information. It may be Jesse's completely correct. I have a suspicion that's the case, but I don't know definitively, so I want to know.
Yeah, anyway. So we thought we'd talk a little bit about tiger muskie today. So if you're not aware, a tiger muskie is when a pike and a muskie have a baby, and it creates a beautiful tiger muskie. Now, you may be wondering, why does Mother Nature produce these beautiful mistakes? Well, this is how. I'll tell you how it happens. During years when water temperatures rise faster than normal, there's a chance that muskies and pike spawning times will overlap. So generally speaking, northern pike are going to spawn earlier than muskie, a little bit earlier. But again, if the water temperatures are a little bit warmer, these two species will spawn at the same time and in the same areas. So what you get is hybrids of pike and muskie called tiger muskie. And tiger muskie are known for being aggressive. This actual article, the funny thing is, this is how they described tiger muskie. They said, aggressive and relentless without the need to reproduce due to being sterile, tiger muskies eat often and grow fast, which is it is true, because actually, interestingly enough, the scientific research on this article, it actually showed that growth rates on average are nearly twice as fast as purebred muskie. So tiger muskie actually grow twice as fast in the first few years of their life. So they can grow much larger. And they actually gave some examples of tiger muskies generally don't get as big as muskie, but even a 40-inch tiger muskie, they said that it's significantly younger than a 40-inch regular muskie because they grow so fast. So that is interesting. But like mentioned, they're sterile, so they can't reproduce. Often, like, what is it? A mule? A donkey and a horse have a baby. It's a mule. They're cool, but they can't reproduce. So it's kind of useless. I don't know. So tiger muskies, they are a cross between pike and muskie, as we mentioned, and they can grow very fast, which is very interesting. And it was funny because on the government website, I thought we could kind of dissect this slightly for an interesting fishing fact, because on the ontario.ca website, they actually gave angling tips for tiger muskie, which is interesting, right? Let's see how good our government website is on catching tiger muskie. So they say peak fishing periods are in June and in the fall when water temperatures begin to cool. Would you agree with that? Nah, Kory, he's nodding his head. He says no. Medium-sized fish are plentiful in the summer months.
The time of year dictates their size, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. It says they will bite all day, but morning and evening is best for the fishing times. I guess that's generally with most musky fishing. Sure.
I'll take that.
Yeah.
I'll give that to them. I'll give that to
That's
them.
every fish ever, though. Like,
Yeah.
that's the blanket rule they put for every
You'll never
fish.
see it say, like, make sure you go fishing right at lunchtime. Yeah.
High skies.
So they say use heavy casting tackle with long rods and strong line to catch this large, strong fighter. Sure, we'll say that. Handle
bad.
carefully using a large net or cradle. Have pliers and gloves to avoid injuring the fish or yourself.
I firsthand experience
Yeah.
with that.
I'm sure we'll get more into that. So I'd say the Ontario government website, we'll give them a solid 2.5 out of 5 for being accurate. So you know what? I just wanted to say the government website's okay, but we're glad today that we have an actual knowledgeable guest and not some sketchy written by AI thing.
Written by AI.
Not a government musky
The
shell.
cool thing about tiger muskies are they're actually stocked in many fisheries across the states, but in Ontario, we have naturally produced tiger muskies. So they're real. They're not stocked fish. So if you do catch one, it truly is a special thing, unless it's Andrew and he has to throw it back without taking a picture. Sorry, pal. So anyway, that was the brief, interesting fishing fact. And now we can get right into the main juice.
Ooh, the juice. I like that. We're going to see how much juice we can squeeze out of Kory here. That's never mind. Let's restart that sentence. We're going to see how much information we can get from Kory's by picking his brain here, because this topic is all about summer musky strategies. So yes, opener has come and gone, but the temperature is rising, and it's rising fast. This is one of those years that apparently will be really good for tiger muskies in reproduction. But we're going to talk about muskie themselves. And I'm very glad, like Jesse mentioned, that we have Kory with us today to be able to just shed some light on the subject of catching these elusive beasts. So first of all, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, Kory, and where people can find you?
Yeah. So lifelong angler. So I grew up down near Lake Huron, actually. So as far back, like when I was like 5, 6 years old, my grandpa used to take me out on Lake Huron bass fishing when my parents were working, and he had to babysit. So been at it forever, as long as I can remember. The Maxfield family, we're all a bunch of anglers. That is what we're actually kind of known for in our hometown. And then from there, like my dad, he was obsessed with steelhead as he was raising me. So he'd take me down on the river, let me run around and catch crayfish and frogs and stuff like that. So it was just always kind of ingrained into my personality and to me as I was coming up as a young kid. So I had a passion for bass fishing for a really long time, right? Like around 2012, I would say that kind of progressed when I was fishing for largemouth, started catching northern pike, right? You're fishing in the slop, in the weeds, you tackle a couple of them, and so it started to grow on me, right? So my dad, he really was always obsessed with muskie forever. And so when that kind of happened, we started like fishing a little bit more, mixing muskie in from 2012 to about 2019. It was kind of like a multi-species thing. But in 2019, we did a fly-in trip. We flew out of Hearst, and we flew about 150 kilometers towards James Bay and landed on a lake called Napkin Lake. And I ended up landing a 43-inch, it was like 20-pound pike. It was just an absolute behemoth.
See, for those in the States, they might call it Serviette Lake, but go ahead.
I like it. So, so after that, came home and it was like, what am I going to do now, right? Like, how many 43-inch monsters are swimming around southern Ontario? So it was like, after that, it was just like muskie. That was it. That was the next target. And basically from 2019 on, it was just like I've been basically obsessed with muskie, student of muskie. So when I'm not doing it, I'm reading about it, I'm watching YouTube videos, I'm doing everything I can to kind of better my angling and whatnot. And then about 2 years ago, my best friend was kind of getting into it, sort of getting into muskie fishing randomly through his side of his family, his in-laws. And so we kind of reconnected and started fishing together again, or started fishing together, I should say. and started Slump Bust Outdoors. So my dad being as obsessed he is with it, come on, let's do it, right? So yeah, so the three of us have been doing that for about 2 years now, and it's fun, right? Something you're doing it anyways. Throw the camera gear up, record stuff. One thing I love about recording is you can always watch back and learn how badly you screwed something up, like a figure eight or something, right? So yeah, we've been doing that for the last couple of years. It's been a lot of fun, but yeah, that's kind of my history and how I started and became obsessed, literally obsessed with musky fishing.
That's awesome. Like you were saying, you're kind of a multi-species angler, especially perhaps more so in the past than now. I'm not sure, but
yeah,
with musky fishing in particular, like what do you think makes it special? Like for yourself, but also for anyone who's wanting to get into it. Like why would someone want to get into fishing for the fish of 10,000 casts?
So they're the meanest fish in the lake, man. They run the show, right? When they eat and when they strike, it's with vicious intentions, and there's nothing else like it in angling. And I don't know, I like adrenaline and I like to shake when I see something like that, when a 40 plus inch muskie blows up on a top water, or you're going into a figure eight and you see that big mouth come up from below your lure and absolutely inhale it. Like there's nothing like it. You know what I mean? The other thing for me, it's a challenge, right? And you said the fish of 10,000 casts. Well, that's what it is. And if you're as obsessed with it as it can happen and it progresses, it makes you want to be a better angler all the time, right? And you continually evolve. And it's cool too, because like every lake can be a little bit different, but you can apply all those different tactics and whatnot to each different location you fish. So it's constantly evolving, and just when you think you figured something out, muskies humble you.
Yeah.
They absolutely humble you. So it's like, yeah, it's always a challenge, and that's pretty much it for me.
I totally agree with that, because like how many times have you gone musky fishing and you're just happy to see a fish? You don't even hook it. Like I don't think there's any other type of fishing where you're just like, we saw one today. You know, did it bite? No.
Yeah.
I think Jesse was humbled last weekend.
Yeah. So we went out, me and Ben from Paddleheads, and we were fishing this section of river. He's like, get our boats below these rapids and no one gets down there and there's this good spots and all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, absolutely, let's do it. So it was a lot of effort to get our boats below the rapids. We got down there. Bluebird sky is the worst. Sunny, bluebird sky is hot. It's like, oh man, this is the worst. But I got a follow from a mid 30 sized fish just come out of the weeds on my Medusa, and then just lazy follow and back down the weeds, and then your heart's just pumping.
Yeah.
Yeah. And no other fish makes you do that. Like I've caught 6.5 pound largemouth. Yeah, that was pretty awesome. But even just seeing a 40-inch muskie, you're like, oh, it's so exciting. And like you said, for me, it's personal accomplishment. It's something that's not easy to do. It's pretty difficult, really, especially in pressured water, to get a good fish. So when it does happen, it's just all those days that, you were casting all day, wrecking your shoulder, it all of a sudden becomes worth it. So yeah,
that's exactly it. It keeps you coming back for more every single time, right? I kind of find that when sometimes when I do worse, like when we get that skunk day, it's like I go home and I'm like, get the YouTube fired up because I'm gonna watch hours. You know what I mean? Just gotta keep plugging forward. So
what else has Minnesota figured out that I can use?
Yeah.
So we're gonna get kind of the sad topic out of the way first, which is talking about some of the ethics. And the reason why they call it sad is it's good and important to learn ethics. If you don't, it becomes a sad story. So we're going to talk a little bit about musky fishing in the summertime, but the ethics that have to be kept in mind. We'll talk about some of the gear, and we're going to talk about, where to fish and all that stuff after that. But first off, something before you go even fishing, and it's summertime, what is something that you keep in mind if you're going to decide to go out musky fishing or not that day?
Yeah, I mean, like water temps, I think that you're alluding to that. Everyone knows that 80 degree sensitive number, right? So obviously keeping an eye on that. That's a big one. I'll always say safety. Safety on the water's number one. I got a healthy dose of what can go wrong sometimes with musky fishing. So
do tell.
Yeah. You want to go into that now, or you want to do it later?
Why not? Let's go. I like storytelling.
All right. Well, I was up in Northwest Ontario, my dad on a muskie trip, and we had been fishing like pretty well all day. So we got out there just after lunch. We grabbed a bite, and I hooked about like a 36-inch pike. Let it go. We kept going on the spot. My dad caught a 42-inch muskie, so we were pretty pumped up, and we flew down to the far end of the lake to check out another spot that we were looking to go to. So, I mean, the fish were just fired up that day. So we were amped up. We knew we were going to get into them. So we're casting a weed bed, and I'm bringing a bucktail in, steaming it in, and I didn't see anything. But going to your big figure 8, and I just got absolutely rocked. And it was a tank of a muskie. I never measured it, but safely 48 inches. You know what I mean? Like one of my biggest ones at the time. So we get into the bag, and I'm just full of adrenaline, just pumped up, right? I was using a glove when I was pulling the fish out of the bag. So the hand that goes in their gill raker up the side of their gills to kind of hoist the head up to get a look at it. That glove was like super slimed up, you know what I mean, from the pike, from the muskie. So the muskie had eaten the bait and took all the hooks kind of tucked up in the corner of its mouth, so that I couldn't see any of the hooks. So instead of now I do it differently, but we can talk about that in tools or whatever. But so I pulled the muskie's head up, and I put the jaw spreaders in, and right when it spread its jaw out, the muskie basically thrashed, right? And because the glove was all slimy, it slipped out of my hand. And I felt a quick connection, no pain, no nothing. So I dropped the muskie back into the bag and looked down, and I mean, I could see the inside of my hand. It was nasty. It's like, you know when you fillet a fish and it just like peels open? That's literally what happened, right? So I looked down at my hand. I was like, Dad, I'm cut. He's like, what do you mean? It's like, no, I'm cut bad. So it starts gushing. So my dad, he helped me take my sweater off. We wrapped my hand up with my sweater, and we still got this muskie in the bag that's full of hooks and whatnot. So my dad hoisted the fish's head out. We got the jaw spreaders back in. I was able to cut a bunch of the hooks. Then I needed to get a photo with it, right? Couldn't just let it go. So we got a photo, no bump, and we got it safely released back into the water. But we were about a half-hour boat ride back to the camp, and we had left our first aid kit in the camp. So we rode back. I kind of got it a little bit dealt with in the camp, and then I was an hour to Dryden to go to the hospital. And when we got into the hospital, the nurse was like, "What happened?" It's like, "I got bit by a fish." She's like, "What?" It's like, "No, seriously, I got bit by a fish." So she takes it off, but the sweater off, and not my sweater at that point, but it was wrapped with gauze, and it just started bleeding like crazy again. It took him like 40 minutes to get to stop bleeding. There's actually a surgeon on staff, so he came out and sewed my hand up. But I had to get him 9 stitches, antibiotics. They told me not to go fishing the rest of the trip, so we trolled instead. But thankfully it was at the end of the trip, so I had like 2 days left, and so either my dad was just out casting and I was driving the boat, or we were trolling. So either way, but awesome. Safety, it's pretty key. Like I got lucky because it was on top of my hand and it missed anything that was like structural, like tendons, anything. But I can only imagine if that was on my wrist.
Yeah.
Or somewhere else, you know what I mean? Like you just need to be careful, and then safety just goes into fall fishing and cold water environments. Like it's just not something to mess around with, right? So that long way around to say safety is very important. It's one of the first things we think about when we get out on the water, for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, safety is huge. Safety is huge, and we talked a bit about their so like with summertime. Like the water temps, for anyone who isn't aware, like you said, the 80-degree temperature range, anything that's above 80 degrees Fahrenheit for water temps, once it gets above 80 degrees, it gets really taxing on them. There's a huge fish trying to move through the water, and when you're fighting them and holding them out of the water, it's a lot of stress on that fish, and the mortality rate just skyrockets when muskie are caught and fought in that 80-degree plus water temperature. So it is something that we look at before we go is hey, we're going muskie fishing, and I know Jesse and I had this, a guide to take us out on a boat almost lined up last year, and it was, we realized, it's like mid-August. Like we can't go through with this. Like we can't go targeting muskie in mid-August and on the Kawartha Lakes because it's gonna be like roasting hot. So it can be disappointing at times, but You have to be flexible. And again, our goal out here for musky angling is not to keep the fish or, kill the fish by any means. We want to have that excitement, have that adrenaline, get the shakes, the good kind, not withdrawals. And then, get that fish back in the water, that amazing, monster.
Yeah. And it does happen. Like I've been out bass fishing because generally if the water's over 80 degrees, we'll be like, you know what, let's, we'll go frog fishing for bass. Bass are fine when you catch them in soupy water, right? But how many times have we been out in the Kawarthas and you'll see a dead muskie floating in the water, like a good fish?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, someone hooked it on bass tackle, fought it for a long time. Like, what are you going to do? Finally get it in. And when they release it, it does swim away, but eventually, it dies because the lactic acid buildup and the fight they're tough fish, but they're very fragile. So
run a marathon and then jump into like a sauna or something like that. You know what I mean?
See how fast you pass out.
So, but the whole summer isn't going to be that hot generally. And oftentimes different lakes are going to be different temperatures and different parts and depths of the lake are going to be different. So it really depends on our next subheading here.
Yeah. So we're going to go into now the really informative side of things. So anyone who wants to get into musky fishing or isn't musky fishing, see what we can glean from what we're going to talk about over the next few subjects, because this is what we have Kory on here for.
It's important because Andrew said glean.
So talking about locations, if you're looking at a body of water, either lakes or rivers and whatnot, for where you'd be focusing on kind of spots for muskie.
Like midsummer, their metabolisms are fired up, right? They're eating a lot more. They're more aggressive. So aside from, we'll talk about locations, but we choose in the summertime, we try to fish fast, right? So cover water, look for active fish, keep moving, because again, you're more likely to run into them, and they can be a little more spread out in different locations and different spots. So another thing that moving quickly does for you is it gives you an indication as to where are they, what are they doing. Let's try to put some patterns together, right? When you're on those trips or even when you're just out for a day. But I mean, weeds, as much as they're still there, there'll always be musky and weeds. Quite honestly, like weeds are very important, but the type of weeds can change. So your emergent weeds, it's come up, it's starting to get in, and the type of weed we look for is cabbage or coontail. Specifically, try to target that. And I like to fish the deep edges. So when we're working in weed beds, it's targeting those outside edges, those areas before it might drop off into deeper water, picking apart pockets, and really looking for change from the weed edge to whatever it's transitioning to, whether it's a rock or sand or mud or whatever that is. Another big thing is there's usually a good push of fish that move on to shoals, deeper water. Shoals and stuff like that. Like we don't go too, like normally in the summer we're usually fishing anywhere in from 20 feet, like nowhere deeper typically, but a lot of those rock shoals will have fish on them. They use them sometimes to digest, and they'll sit up there in the summer. They feel safe and stuff like that. So we'll work those. A lot of we like to think of like anywhere where you can find a pinch point or where current will be working through. So a neck down area or like a saddle between, maybe it's two higher areas with a deeper cut through it. Anywhere where it's kind of forcing water through. Those muskies, obviously they sit on that stuff, and when bait or whatever's coming through, that's where they ambush and that's where they feed. A lot of times you'll get good weed growth in there as well. So those are the primary areas we look at. And then again, it's about moving, right? It's about patterning. Are they sitting? Are they on the deep edge, the secondary break? Are they up tight? Are they in the cover? And a lot of that's weather dependent, conditions dependent. So it's a lot of reading the water when you're out there and understanding and putting a pattern together.
So if you have, let's say, like a lake, pretty much all lakes, unless it's a quarry, has flow of some sort through it. So you're mainly looking for current areas with access to deep water, access to shallow water. So it could be, somewhat of a drop off, more so like a sharper edge than just kind of slow, gradual slope. So let's say you find a spot that is 20 feet deep over here in the hole, and it comes up within this distance of 15 feet, it comes up to a nice 4-foot shallow weed bed. You're behind an island and there's current beside you.
Yeah.
The muskie's going to be essentially in that area. It might be in the shallows, might be in the deep hole, might be, do they ever sit right in the current too?
Yeah. There's usually, we like to call it the spot on the spot, right? And that's just about finding that location that they're looking to ambush and where they're sitting and orienting to that structure and to that cover. A lot of times when we're approaching like a complex structure like that, we'll start out off our secondary break. So, holding the boat out a little farther, working that deeper edge first, and then taking a second pass and kind of working in tighter if you don't see anything, right? You just don't know. Like, they could be anywhere. A lot of times in the summer, it's not super predictable. But what we typically find when we're on trips is you can put together a pattern though, right, based on what most of the fish are doing, and it can be repeatable, right?
If you pull the fish off of that shallow cover, focus on shallow cover.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And then, and when you're fishing quickly in the summer, like you can move a number of fish and you should be able to put it together. One other thing, wind-blown structures. So, I mentioned current. Well, wind blowing into like a point, or wind blowing into a bay or a weed bed or a shoal or some kind of rock complex. That is so important. Something it does is it congregates bait fish, and it congregates and pushes food into those areas. There's been a number of times that saved our trip, right? You get a big push of wind and we've been struggling and it's changed, and you hit those windblown areas and we usually get a fish. So that is something to pay attention to completely.
Cool. So we're going to try and debunk, or either debunk or confirm, about time of day. Does time of day make a big difference?
It does, for sure. But what I think makes more or is more important than time of day is weather. You could have a sunny day, it's bluebird conditions, and in the afternoon you get a wind change, or the wind picks up. That kind of thing can absolutely fire the fish up. So for me, it's majors and minors play a big part. Again, you go back to that government website and they let the cat out of the bag. They said sundown, low light periods. So for sure.
That's the juice.
For sure.
The government website. They got the juice.
Yeah, exactly. You don't need to spend time on water. Just read about it on the government website. You're good. No, so we pay close attention to the majors and minors being on your best spots during those times, but weather trumps all. So whether it be thunderstorm or a pressure system coming in, a weather system coming in, being in front of that, and then after that system blows through, there's usually a post front bite that we find we can do pretty well on. And then, like I said, just watching that wind change. If it's stable and it's like midsummer, high pressure, it's been sunny. Yeah, low light periods. You gotta go with that. Early morning, late at night, or even, unfortunately, sometimes it's night. You gotta fish at night, right? It's not as fun. It can be a pain just because of, you can't see, all those different reasons, but those fish, when it gets hot, when it gets stable like that, like they can choose to feed at night. Cooler temperatures, they have the cover of night. So yeah, we find that's a last ditch effort though. Like, if I can do anything else before I like going night fishing, but you have to, you got to do it, right?
Yeah. And if you notice that Jesse's been quiet, it's because he's been taking huge notes this entire time. But what do you think, Jesse? Do you put stock into the whole majors and minors thing? Like, what's your opinion?
Again, not a musky expert.
Neither am I, but I have an opinion.
Yeah, I have an opinion on it. Actually, funny enough, I actually just had a message from Jason, who's one of our Patreon members, and he asked me about the majors and minors and if it actually mattered. I have heard both sides. I actually went to at Musky Odyssey. I watched Stephen Paul give a seminar. And he basically was like, majors and minors, like, fish don't care about that. And then I've heard other people be like, absolutely, you need to do this. So I've heard both sides. Yeah. He's crazy, but hey, he catches a lot of fish.
I'm kidding. He does.
He was crazy though. But from what I've noticed, a few times me and Andrew had good days, and then we'll look back and be like, you know what? That fish that we caught, that was right on a major, or that fish that we had a follow that was right on a major as well. Like, for instance, that fish I had a follow on last week, Ben was like, oh, that was literally right on a minor. Like that time, that one fish came out after fishing all day just happened to me on that time. So I don't know. I'm not a scientist or a biologist, but it seems to be something about that actually makes sense. Again, when we go fishing, we fish when we can fish. I'm not going to be like, oh, I can only fish in the afternoon and there's no major or minor, so I'm not going to go fishing. I'm still going to fish, but if I'm fishing when those times and I look ahead, I'm like, you know what, there's a major at 6:30. I'm going to make sure that I'm on my best spot at that time. Will it make a difference? Probably. But yeah, so kind of,
we believe in it.
I try to.
And even if it just gives us confidence, then that's
confidence is everything.
Yeah, that matters, man. Yeah. That matters. Yeah. If you're working your bait just that little bit better, that little bit harder, and hopefully you get in front of a fish and they want to eat it, and then you feel like the majors and minors matter. But I mean, we find they do. I'm sure if I went back, like I keep my own records of what I caught muskies on and whatnot. I wish now maybe that I recorded when the majors and minors were so I could know a little bit more, but I don't know. We feel it matters and we pay attention to it. So
and like good point. Even if it doesn't, if that's the reminder you need to put on your A game and like kind of reset for the day, like, all right, let's go to my confidence bait. Let's go to my confidence spot. Let's go to all this stuff. And if that's the reminder you need to go do that stuff, you're going to have improvement regardless. But I think there's probably some stock to take in it personally.
Sometimes I lie to Andrew and tell him it's a major just so he'll be on his own. It's like the major was hours
just a half hour ago. You said it was a major. Yeah, it's now minor. Another half hour is going to be a major
too.
Put that BFS rod away. We're going for musky.
Yeah.
So the next thing we're going to talk about is presentation. We've now decided where we're going to go. I've decided when I'm going to go. And now we're going to talk about presentation. So in the summer, what are some baits and how do you fish them? What are some of your confidence baits?
A lot of bucktails. Like I really like fishing blades in the summertime when it's a low pressure. When it gets to like high pressure post front, you get that north blow, changes a little bit. But again, I'm trying to fish quicker in the summer. I'm trying to contact an aggressive, active fish that's feeding. So a lot of times I'll stick to blades. That's my start, right? That's my go-to at first.
What size blades do you normally fish in the summer? Like, does it vary?
Summer, yeah, it does. Like I typically, because pulling a 12 blade trying to fish quick is not a recipe for lasting all year, but yeah, like 8s, 9s. I use a lot of like staggered blades, 8-9 combos. Sometimes it'll be like Indiana, Colorado is the one everyone kind of knows, Musky Frenzy, right? So that kind of pattern for sure, or those kind of blades. I'll step it up when it gets rough. When the conditions are rougher, like if that, or at night or in low light conditions, I'll step the blades up. But predominantly like 8s, 9s up through until probably like mid-August. Then I start increasing my blade size into September. In September, like that late August, late summer, you get sometimes the first cool down, and in the end of August, you can get a push of bigger fish. And I like to use bigger blades, try to get their attention more that time of year. But yeah, midsummer, July, when their metabolism's really firing, you want to fish fast, and you're saving and conserving energy with probably 8s and 9s, things like that.
Is there anything besides blades then that you were going to go on about, like other baits that you like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll run top water. Got some baits here, right? So again, I'm sticking with that theme a little bit there. So like top water choppers, especially like late at night, that early morning, that time of the day. I don't fish swim baits all that much in the summer. Like if I'm going to be running a straight retrieve bait that time of year, I'd just rather be running blades, to be quite honest with you. But I talked about like that post front. So one, if blades aren't working, and then two, a lot of times in that high pressure system, Medusas, I love tubes. I said that earlier. Yeah, there you go. There you go, Jesse. But I'll work them fast. I'll rip them. Like everyone says rip and rubber. That's the typical thing. But I'm putting a little bit, like I'm ripping it hard and giving it a little bit of slack back to try and get that head first drop, and then I'm using that slack and ripping it again, right, to get it to quick a quick direction change, right? So that's one thing. Like when you're using those kinds of baits, that's what you want. That's why you're using them, is directional change. You're trying to trigger a bite that way. For whatever reason, last year I had like, I don't know, I caught like one or two fish on blades. So it's like yeah, it, again, goes back to confidence. It wasn't working for me last year, and what was working for me was ripping rubbers. So I stuck with that for most of the year, and I don't know if just over time it was like I was just like so confident with it. I was working it that much better that I was landing more fish that way. But I do love blades, and it makes sense to me when I think about what the summer is and how I want to fish in the summer, right? So
talking about like presentations, you have like beginner kind of thing of like cast and retrieve some blades, varying depths, varying weights of the blades. You can swap that up to more advanced techniques like ripping rubber or like a dive and rise or something like that. But the main thing, if someone hasn't gone musky fishing, they've already heard you mention the figure eight before. Do you figure eight after every cast? And just describe briefly kind of what is your figure eight? Because I know some guys, they'll kind of do just like an L shape or a big circle. Like, what do you like to do for your figure eight?
I'm smiling because my answer is yes, but in
Yes, you
reality,
should.
in reality, I lost a fish last weekend because I was looking at my electronics as I was coming into my figure eight. So I'm going around the corner and I got smoked. I got absolutely rocked on the top corner where you want them to eat because you can set the hook and that's the right spot. But I was like this. So unfortunately, I didn't manage to get that one in the boat. But yeah, you should. I mean, whether you're doing a full figure eight, and a lot of that'll go to water clarity. If your water clarity is poor, 100%, you're blind figure eighting every single time, and you should, because you can't see if a fish is there.
Mhm.
If I'm fishing like a really clear water system, not always, but it's just you should at least do the big lazy L turn at a very minimum. Look, watch behind your bait. Give a fish, if one, maybe you brought one in 3 casts before and it's positioned under your boat. You don't know that, right? They could come up from underneath, at your feet, right? And you just don't see them. They just come out of nowhere and eat, right? So
That's for my first. So my second muskie I caught was on a figure eight. We were fishing out of the Sports Pal, and I was casting. It was on
nice.
the Blackfly Lures spinner bait there, and so I cast out, reeling it in, and I'm like, oh, I gotta remember, I got a figure eight, and I did that first turn, and I saw this flash, and like you said, I had no clue it was there. The water quality, it's stained water, but we weren't fishing deep. I'm like, I would be able to see if one was there. Absolutely not. It was right behind the bait. Didn't come under the boat, but it was right behind that spinner bait. And it wasn't until he opened his mouth that I'm like, that's a muskie, and it annihilated it and started jumping around the boat. That was a fun fish.
Something I learned with figure eights, it was more 5-6 years ago. It was just getting the motion down. Like not thinking too much about it, just getting that figure eight, hanging it in the corner, slowing it down in the corner, and then actually speeding up through the middle, bringing it back around and hanging it again in that corner. And getting that motion down so that it almost becomes muscle memory, right? When you're doing it every time, was important when I was first starting out, because what happens is everyone freaks out when a fish comes falling in. It doesn't matter how experienced you think you are. First couple years, for sure, you see this fish steamrolling in, and it's like you forget what you're doing, right? So getting that motion down and just practicing it and practicing it and practicing it, it becomes part of your cast, right? And hanging it in the corner, what that does, it gives a fish an opportunity to eat the bait. So, and then also that's the best point when you're out, you can get the most leverage to pull back into the fish's body to set the hook. And then if it doesn't eat in that corner, what you want to do, you don't always want to hook them in the middle of your straightaway, because you've got no leverage on to hook the fish and then to fight the fish. So you're moving it to try to get their attention, to keep them engaged on the bait. They're like a cat, right? The quicker you move it away from them, the more they want it. So you're moving it quick through your straightaway, and you're bringing it back around, and then again giving them that opportunity to eat it in the corner, and slowing it down and hanging it, saying, "Come on, it's right there for you, right? Come and eat it."
One thing I was going to say about figure eights, and it may sound like a dumb question to someone who hasn't tried to do figure eights before, but I was doing it wrong at first, and I quickly learned Oh, Jesse pointed out, he's like, yeah, you shouldn't do that. When you're doing the figure eight pattern, from what I've learned, is because, like you say, up in the corners on the ends of that eight, essentially, it's more like an infinity sign technically when you look at it. But anyways,
Yeah.
at the ends of the top and bottom of that figure eight pattern, you want to be moving the rod up and away from the edge of the boat. Because if you're bringing it down towards you on those corners, you have nowhere to set your hook.
There's no leverage, right? It's the worst when they eat at your
Yeah.
feet. The
So
worst.
you kind of like draw it away from the boat on the
Yep.
outside, and then you move that fast back towards the gunnel, draw it away again on the other end. So just knowing the direction, and that's part of the thing, is training yourself. Because I know Jesse lost to Muskie. He approached the corner wrong, had a strike, and he lost the muskie because there's nothing you can do. Even to the best of us, like,
You're not a musky fisherman if you haven't missed one or screwed up a figure eight. That's what I'll say. Like, it's just it happens to everyone. But yeah, the other thing is, one thing that a lot of people also make mistakes, and I've made that mistake. And I said earlier that it's great to watch video back when you're recording, because I can see how that fish reacted to what I was doing. But taking that corner too sharp, it's like the most common mistake. They want that wide turn because the fish has to be able to position its body and turn to want to eat it. So when you're doing a real sharp turn, it might work on a 30-incher, but you ever get like a 45 to 50-inch fish, they're not turning sharp in that corner.
they don't pivot their body in the center
Yeah,
of it. Like,
exactly. So you really want to give them that opportunity to be able to eat it. And that's really what it is positioning the fish, so that you try to get in the best position to eat the bait.
That's awesome. So we're going to go into next about some gear. And one of the first things when you think of gear for muskie is, I know for me, I got to make sure my leader is tied on. And we have excellent giveaway for anyone listening to this podcast right now. For all of our Patreon members, we have some awesome leaders. Jesse, why don't you tell us about that giveaway that they have a chance to win this week?
Ooh, so again, you have to be a Patreon member to win this giveaway. And this is actually kind of a random giveaway. We're not really affiliated with this company at all, but our buddy Jake, Canadian Shield Man, he gave us a whole bunch of stealth tackle leaders. Now, if you know anything about musky fishing, stealth tackle leaders are some of the best in the biz. They're highly regarded. The giveaway this week, there's actually about 10 leaders, 10 packs of leaders. And I'm going to just go through some of these. These are heavy duty, hardcore musky leaders. There's a bunch of packs of 14-inch, 100-pound fluorocarbon leaders, 2 packs of 50-strand, 175-pound braided wire leaders. And then there's a whole bunch of packs of straight solid wire leaders as well. So it's well over $100 of value in these really, really good leaders. And again, like Andrew said, you need leaders for musky fishing. It's not something that you can just be like, you know what, I'll buy some cheap ones at Walmart. Do yourself a favor. Obviously, try to win this giveaway, but buy some good leaders. And again, stealth tackle, legit leaders. There's lots of good companies out there that make them, but that's the giveaway for today. Over $100 value of some awesome leaders. So all Patreon members will be automatically entered into this giveaway. And if you win this and you don't musky fish, this would make a heck of a gift to someone that does musky fish. So that's the giveaway.
There's some good selection there.
Yep. So these will cover all kinds of different techniques, from jerkbait fishing to fishing rubber to bucktail leaders. So you're all set. And this will probably last you multiple years. If you fish as much as I do, it'll last you a decade.
Going on with more gear, what is something that you recommend for someone fishing muskie? What's kind of a combo or some gear you'd recommend for them to have to be able to target the species well?
Yeah, for summer fishing specifically. So like we mentioned in the figure eight, getting lots of length and wide figure eight. So you need a big rod, right? You need a longer rod. Usually is better. I like 9 foot. That's usually around 9.96. 10 footers are hard to find, so I don't have many of them. But usually in like that heavy or extra heavy, usually is what I look for. A lot of the rods, when you go to look at them, you can look at the actual lure rating on the rod. So if you're running bucktails, if you're running rubber, you can kind of see what the rod's meant for that way. For someone who doesn't fish that often or might do it the odd time, I would say a heavy rod. And then for summer fishing, I usually go with a high gear ratio. That's getting more speed. The more it brings in more line per crank. So that's like the 7-8-1 kind of gear ratio on your reel, kind of for summer fishing. And then fall fishing, I like to slow it down, so I'll use a lower gear ratio at that time of year. What that does for me personally, means that I don't have to change the way I'm reeling. I can still reel at that same steady pace, and I don't have to think about it. The less I have to think when I'm out there fishing, the better. I can think about everything else. But yeah, and then again, the length and rod, what that helps you for is also casting. So when you're throwing musky baits all day, it's taxing on your body. So anything that you can get like an advantage on to help you with that in the long run, it comes in handy. So those longer rods, what they do is they provide more flex, more whip in your cast, and it can help you to cast further with less effort. So the lower gear ratio, that helps you bring in bigger baits with less effort. It cranks in less line per turn. So it's almost like more, I guess, more powerful. You're cranking less line in.
It's way more torque, like a winch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that will keep you fresh throwing. I mean, I like to throw pounders and big baits like that in the fall. So I mean, that's super important when I want to last for more than 4 hours throwing big baits like that. You can pick up a combo when you're new to musky fishing that can work for most of the like average baits, smaller baits like a heavy rod, and that high speed reel will probably do you for most of what you'd be doing. And then, like I said, when you get into fall, you can always slow down your retrieve with a high gear reel. You just have to think about it and make a conscious effort to do it, right? The fish don't want to move. They don't want to move very far, and they don't want to have to chase something down. So it allows that presentation to hang in their face a little bit more.
And what do you prefer for a casting reel? Like, what size do you normally fish? For a long time, fish just a 300. Yep. I have a 400 now as well. I know some guys, they'll fish like 600s, and it's like, okay. It hurts my hand to hold that, but okay.
Yeah.
But no, what do you prefer? Like
I use a Tranx 400. That's what I use. I've got 3 of them, different for different rods.
Boy, tell us how you really feel.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, there's lots of different brands you could get, right? But yeah, the 400 for me, it serves all year. It can still throw those smaller baits. You could get to that like 500 size reel in the fall, but again, it's big, it's bulky. Mm-hmm. The 400 in a low gear ratio does it for me. It's enough. So that's kind of what I try to simplify it. I keep my gear pretty static. I like repeating and being comfortable with what I'm using, being confident with what I'm using. So that for me it works for everything. And then like I said, I switched the ratio based on what I'm doing.
Now, as for tools, you mentioned earlier with that horror story at the outset of the episode. You have a glove with you. You got pliers. I know for myself, I always have like the longest set of needle nose I can find, and I like the ones with the bent tip. I just find it's easier to get a bit of leverage on some of the hooks. But you got the long hook retrieval, nice.
So important, man. So important. Yeah. If you're fishing like pull pause, glide bait, or not so much glide baits, but for me, it's usually tubes or Medusas, but glide baits too. A lot of the time, what happens is they eat on the pause and they'll inhale the bait. So they'll just, exactly. You can imagine, right? The bait pauses, the mouth swallows. So that can be a problem, right? Even with long pliers, they don't always reach. So those are important, like long nose pliers, like we said. So that's kind of the size that I use. And then one thing I learned, so I know a lot of people, this isn't a tool that a lot of anglers like because they feel it's if you hold the fish up, it'll break their jaw. Like that's but that's not why we use them. So when a fish, it's for safety's number one for the angler more than the fish, and I learned that, like I said. But I'll use this if it's really inhaled and it's tough to get at, I'll use a boga grip on their bottom jaw. And then you basically hoist them on the gunnel of the boat with their mouth. And what it does is it locks their mouth open.
Yeah.
Right? And then you can get at it without worrying about that mouth or that jaw spreader popping out and the mouth clamping down on your hand, right?
And you can do that right in the basket of the net too. So if, let's say
Exactly.
like, oh, they're starting to flop around, you can release it easily enough, or just let go of that thing. It's still
It,
locked onto their jaw. And now they're
exactly.
back
And
in the water. Like it's not going to land on the bottom of the boat. Yeah, that's
so
a good tip.
that was a change we made after that happened. I won't do it any other way. I mean,
Yep.
it's honestly, it's not worth it.
Yep.
It's not worth it. So the other thing is hook cutters. If you're going for muskie and you don't have a pair of these, you're doing muskies a disservice. So
Cutters, we're not talking about like lineman pliers. We mean
no,
like legit, like
yeah,
Knipex mini bolt cutters.
yeah. So I cut hooks. I mean, ripping hooks out of muskies' faces does them no good either, right? So where I can, I'll cut and pull the barb out after. But yeah, it's probably one of the most important things, because not having them, and if a fish swallows that bait, they will die. Like they are one of the most ferocious fish that swims, but they're also very delicate when you get them out of their natural environment, right? So being able to cut those hooks and do it as quick and as easy as possible, it will save fish in the long run. The other thing is a big net. I think we all probably, or you mentioned it earlier, and I'm not talking about like a salmon net. I'm talking about like a proper musky net. I find the thicker mesh nets, they foul up your hooks less. There's a lot less dealing with it. But what those nets do, not only does it allow the fish to recover, but it allows everyone in the boat to recover and relax and let that adrenaline kind of ease out a bit, and everyone calms down because that fish is sitting in the bag. It's fine. You get to those hooks once you're collected, and you get them out safely. And afterwards, you let the fish sit. You can let it sit, and it'll recover in that bag. It's breathing in the water, the oxygen in the water, and then you can get your photo and your bump and whatnot. But it's incredibly important, and it speaks also to that 80-degree thing, right? When the water temps even start to get into that, you want to keep that fish in the water as much as possible. Like, don't bump it, don't need a measurement, don't get it. You can do your photo op beside the boat with the fish still in the water. You know what I mean? Like those nets are just so important to keeping a fish alive. So
absolutely, that covers even musky handling at the end there. That covers it pretty well. The one thing I'd only add to that, not that you missed it, but for anyone trying to take a picture of a muskie or hold a muskie or even large pike, don't just gill it and lift it straight up. They should be lifted horizontally and supported on the belly. Otherwise you can start separating their spine and breaking their jaw and just tearing them up, literally tearing them up.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing I'd add for anyone who is inexperienced with it. Watch how some of these other, look at some pictures, look at Slump Bust Outdoors, Instagram, and whatnot, see how they're holding their muskie. It's never, once they get over like a decent sized fish, you really have to handle them carefully, or else, as much as you want that fish to survive, you're going to be hurting it.
Yeah. It's a learning curve. Everyone goes through it. No one's
been perfect from the start.
Yeah, I'm 6 years in, and believe me, I am nowhere near an expert or nowhere near perfect at anything we do out there. But it certainly is. It's a learning curve. But if you can be prepared as best as possible when you get out there, it's just, when you're new to it, it keeps you safe first and foremost, and then secondly, it keeps the muskie safe, right? So yeah, super important. Yeah, the vertical holds. I think everyone that's on social media knows what the social media police out there are going to say about those. So you might as well just support it horizontally so that you don't have to listen to it.
If you go on the Bass Pro at Vaughan Mills, you're going to look and you're going to see a photo of a guy in the men's washroom holding it's like 40-inch pike or to musk. I don't know what it is. Like just by the gill, holding it right up. Guess what? He killed it to eat it. That thing's dead. Like that's not how you hold a live one for release. So there's a difference. We've learned since the 50s how to handle fish a bit better. But that's about all the questions that we had to go over. But we have a few more from our awesome listeners. So Jesse, why don't you go ahead and give us a couple of those?
Yeah, so I actually put up a poll or a question and answer on our Instagram story. So make sure you follow us on Instagram. The link is below in the show notes too. As well as I'll put the link as well for Kory's Instagram and Slump Bust Outdoors and their YouTube and all the ways you can find him, because they make some awesome musky fishing content. But I did put up a question and answer, and I said, ask Kory anything musky related. You have to always say musky related or fishing related, because then they'll just ask weird questions. Some of these I'm not going to ask you because we kind of covered them in the podcast already, but I'm going to talk about the ones that we didn't cover. But first, I'm going to start off with Jonah from Van Beast Fishing. His question is, Kory, why are you so handsome? I actually got to meet that guy at Musky Odyssey. He's a super nice guy.
Yeah, he's a great dude, and he's an absolute fish catching machine.
He is.
You should have had him on here.
I was
All right,
scared. I
We're
didn't
going
want
to
to.
cancel the show.
All right, here is a good question from Lip Ripper 19. He says, "What is your favorite finesse musky tactic?"
I tubes. I love tube fishing. I'm not like glide baits. I use from time to time, but it's like when I do, it's usually if it's really early season, so like opener, or late in the year in specific conditions. But more tubes. That in recent years, that's been my number one, and last year and this year actually, to be honest with you. I like ripping rubber. The thing I like about that is I can work it shallow, I can work it off break lines, I can work it deep. It depends on what I want to do and what I want to do with it. I'm from St. Clair, so that's my home water. So rubber's like ingrained into me, right? That's the main bait we're fishing with. So that's kind of the best, and it's what I'm most comfortable with, right?
What are your thoughts on a finesse presentation of fish for bass, but use a leader?
No, yeah. Dive and rise is another one, but again, like I can only speak to really what I'm confident with, right? And that to me, with where I'm at in my musky fishing, it's about confidence for me. So if I'm throwing something that I'm like, am I working this right, or am I using it in the proper presentation, then what's the point? For me, I'd rather use a bait that I every time I have that bait in the water, I'm bringing it in, retrieving it, going, damn, I've got a good shot at a muskie. If I'm on the right spot, if I feel like I'm getting my bait in front of them, I'm like, I can work this thing and make them eat it, right? They're gonna eat it. That's how confident you need to be, right? So
that's why I throw Medusa 90% of the time. Literally.
yeah.
All right, here's another good question from Rob Angus. He says, "What's your favorite musky markings? Barred, spotted, clear, or tiger?"
I don't know if you guys leopard muskies. You ever heard people talk about those, like the St. Lawrence strain? Great Lakes strain are my favorite. I mean, it's my home area, so I love that. But leopard muskies, I find it's just the coolest pattern ever. I've only caught one tiger, so that would be the next one. Yeah, tied. Exactly. Mine was in season though.
Tied.
And yours probably wasn't 20 inches long either.
It wasn't huge.
Okay,
It wasn't huge. You know, I picked the wrong time of year to get the bigger ones according to the government website, right? They only eat
true.
during certain times of year. So, yeah, I love that Great Lakes strain, and I think that's just a product of where I fish all the time. But when you get those leopard muskies and that kind of that pattern, I think they're absolutely gorgeous, right? So
I'd have to say myself, like obviously tiger muskies are gorgeous, but of the ones that I've caught, I caught one like a clear muskie that was flawless. It was the most plain style of muskie for sure, but it was flawless. And me and Andrew just stared at it for like 2 minutes. Look at that thing.
I find sometimes the clear ones, they look meaner than some of the other ones. They're just like the scars and stuff just show up a lot more. It doesn't get muted out with the pattern.
The tattoos are showing, the piercings. Yeah.
Yeah. The ones up in Northwest Ontario, a lot of them are clear too, and they're vicious up there. So
here's another question. This is a good one from Dylan. He says, "Do you have any tips for shore anglers for musky fishing?"
Get a boat. I'm just kidding.
No, you know what? I've done, like, I'll be transparent as it gets. I've shore fished before for them in St. Clair, and sometimes when we're up north on like rivers and pools and stuff like that. So don't lay them down in gravel. I think that's protect their slime coat. So be prepared with like some sort of pad or something to lay them down on if you can't do it in the water right in front of you. Just have a plan when you get out there. Don't just go out there and start casting and not look around. Is there a safe spot to land the fish? How am I actually going to unhook it and deal with the process without hurting the fish, and being safe for yourself doing it at the same time. Extended nets, or extended poles on your net if you're fishing from some sort of elevation, so that you can properly net it and it isn't just flailing around down in the water and you're trying to hoist it up some other way. I don't know. But yeah, I would say that. I mean, I would fish at the water's edge as much as physically possible if you can, right?
Definitely. We'll do one more question. This might be a hard one for you. Pick one musky lure to use all year long.
If I had to pick one musky lure and it was one only, I would probably go with blades, because I think that you'd pick up a lot of fish in the summer. You'd have a ton of fun, and it would be really good up until like October, and then it would suck, and, and it would be hard. But I would like rely. Yeah, there you go. I would rely on being happy about all the muskies that I caught when it was working.
Fair enough. And your shoulder wouldn't be destroyed. He's like, my one lure I pick is the pounder.
yeah, exactly. You fish for June and then you're done.
Fish for one day and then you're done.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Yeah, you know what? There's a bunch of other questions, but we kind of, like I said, we kind of covered most of the topics. There was quite a few that were just like, where do I find muskie? What's the best time to? We already covered that, so we're not going to go through that. So this was a great episode, because I always say this. I love doing episodes where, like, we're not experts in fishing. We do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But I love episodes when we get to have on a guest that is far more experienced than us, so that I can learn something. Forget about you guys listening. I don't care about you. Just kidding. We love you. But I like to learn on these podcasts too. We're humble. We suck at musky fishing. Let's be serious. So I learned a lot today. What about you, Andrew?
I learned a ton. Anything that I don't know how to fish, we just try and get a guest on so that I can try it that year. And I'm excited to be using some of those tips, especially locations and whatnot. That's something that I didn't pay too much attention about in years previous. But using some of those tips on narrowing down where I'm going to be fishing, making sure I'm finding that pattern before I spend the whole day just doing the thing I want to catch the muskie on. Which is what I usually try and do. Yeah. It's like, it's going to be a suic today, and it's October.
Yeah, we always say let the fish tell you what they want to eat, right?
Yeah. So thank you very much for coming on the show, Kory. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing your experience and your some of the wisdom that you have about this awesome fishery that we have. We also want to give a big thanks to everyone who is listening, everyone who has followed, everyone who's left a review. We really, really appreciate reviews. If you leave a really good one, and especially if it's humorous, we tend to try and read them as well on some of the shows. So keep that in mind if you want to be kind of featured on a show, and leave a good review for us. Even if you aren't an experienced angler, it's still a way to kind of get heard. But we really appreciate that. And of course, that awesome giveaway we talked about today is for our Patreon-only listeners. So they're automatically entered in to win those leaders that we have. And that draw will be pulled later on. So in the meantime, we have to finish off with the quote of the week. And as usual, we never like to remind the person who has it. So Kory, what's that quote of the week?
Oh, pressure. Time on water. Time on water. That's the biggest thing in musky fishing. That's it.
That's perfect.